I want to begin this morning by telling you a story about my own experience with happiness, or perhaps I should say my experience with being happy. Now, I'm looking out at my wife, who was a participant in this story to some extent. I imagine she'll start giggling pretty soon. So some years ago, long before I had become a UU minister, Carol and I were participating in a talent show at the UU congregation we belong to. Now, I think it's safe to say that the only real qualification for being in this show was that you didn't really have to have any talent. In any case, for our part, these church friends and I, my wife included, we were performing a brief skit in which each of us was going to portray one of the seven dwarfs, as in Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Oh my God.
Now, I felt pretty good going in about my upcoming performance, since playing roles that don't require much talent or much height come pretty naturally to me. And the seven dwarfs have pretty distinct personalities and characteristics, right? Grumpy, sleepy, dopey, bashful, and so on. I mean, how hard could it be? The only one I have never been sure on what exactly he does is Doc, but luckily one of my fellow castmates wanted to be Doc, so that was fine. Now, when I got to the church that night, I was under the impression that I was going to play Dopey, a role for which I'm very, very well qualified. But there was some kind of a mix-up in our assignments, and when the group gathered that evening, I was reminded I was supposed to play Happy. Now, I know that doesn't sound like a big deal, going out on stage and being happy, but the more and more I thought about what Happy the dwarf looks like, or how I might interpret them, I drew a blank. And the longer I thought about it, the more confused and even a little stressed out I got. All these crazy questions started racing through my mind. Does being happy, with a capital H, simply mean that I smile? Do I have to smile in a particular way? Do I try to look content, satisfied, joyful? Oh my God, what do they look like? Finally, out of mounting frustration and confusion, I looked at my castmates and uttered probably one of the saddest statements of my entire life. This is where Carol starts to crack up. I looked at him and I just said, guys, I don't know how to be happy. Can one of you take that part? Thankfully, in between some giggles and some feeling kind of sorry for me, one of my friends agreed to switch roles, and I took on the very challenging role of Sleepy, which really takes a lot of talent, I'll tell you. Now, needless to say, I struggled to play Happy from Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Probably doesn't have much deep spiritual significance. Did I lose? Let's see. Well, it says I'm still on. Did it just die? That's all right. We have backup. Yeah, I'll just keep it. Yep. How's that, everybody? How's that? Better? Okay, there we go. Where was I? Oh yeah, I was having trouble being happy. That's right. So, there's probably not a lot of deep spiritual learning to be done there. I'm sure that my uncertainty and confusion have a lot more to do with me and my issues than they do with any profound societal or spiritual insights. But, and there's always a but, I do think that we live in a world and a culture in which there is some confusion, and I would certainly say some misinformation about the nature of happiness, and especially about what it means to be happy. Now, without question, one thing that makes this country, I think, somewhat unique is that we were founded for happiness. Being happy is one of our foundational goals, one of our reasons for being. You all know what I'm talking about here, I'm sure. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created equal and that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, in many ways, I think these timeless and inspiring words from the Declaration of Independence point to one of our greatest strengths and one of our greatest weaknesses as a nation, a culture, and a society. On the positive side, we affirm human happiness as a natural right, as a human right, as a universal right, a right that isn't supposed to be reserved for some, but is instead available to all. Of course, much of our history has been the story of how unequally and unfairly the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness have been distributed and protected. That we have not done a good job at. But those rights, they're there, and they are supposed to, they call us to make them universal and unconditional. The right to pursue happiness is for everyone. That's a strength. Now, as beautiful and uplifting as the Declaration's words are about the universality of human happiness, I also think those words are problematic. And I think the problem with the way happiness is understood in the Declaration, and how I think it's been understood a lot throughout our nation's history and in our culture, has to do with one word, and that word is pursuit. You see, pursuing happiness suggests that happiness is something we don't generally have, something we need to chase, something we must always be seeking in order to obtain it or catch up to it. Happiness, in this view, feels like an object that we can somehow possess, maybe a territory that we can conquer, an elusive prey that we must always be trying to capture. And what are the consequences of what I'm going to call this pursuit model of human happiness? Well, I think the consequences are experienced every day in a society, a culture, and especially in an economy that are often driven by consumption, by incessant advertising that breeds planned and chronic dissatisfaction, and by the seemingly endless acquisition of more and more things that we are promised will make us happy. No matter what or how much we possess, time and again we are reminded that there's something a little better, something that's a little faster, something more beautiful that we just need to have in order to be truly accepted and content. No matter how happy or satisfied we may feel, we can always be happier if we buy, if we own, if we pursue that one item or object that we may not really need, but that will most certainly make us happy. Now, when we see happiness in this way, when we spend our days pursuing a kind of happiness that we can't ever really quite catch up to or achieve, we can find ourselves on a path leading not to happiness, but instead to chronic discontent, dissatisfaction, and yes, even dis-ease. Study after study confirms that endless accumulation of stuff is not a path to happiness. In fact, people who have devoted most of their lives to acquisition and consumption often find themselves unhappy and unhealthy. So if happiness isn't something we pursue, what is it? Well, thankfully, there is another approach to happiness, another way of understanding what it means to be happy, a way that is radically different from the consumption-driven model that predominates in our culture. And I think that alternative approach can be found in most of the world's wisdom and spirit traditions, in the beauty of music and dance, in the love of family, friends, and community, and most certainly in the heaven of a field of goldenrods that Mary Oliver describes so beautifully. You see, rather than finding happiness in the fleeting gratification of a new purchase or in the endless pursuit of more and more, happiness in this other view is first and foremost relational. Happiness flows from deep connection. Happiness is about sharing one's heart and one's life with others. Happiness isn't about buying, it's about belonging. It's about being welcomed and celebrated for who one is. It's about being part of something beautiful, something greater, and about being so connected that our lives are filled with love and wonder and joy that transcends all the categories and separations that continually plague the human family. Rather than being about constantly adding more to our already overburdened selves, happiness has so much more to do with simply being, and sometimes letting go. Letting go of our need to pursue more and more things so that we can simply be present to the joy, the blessing, and yes, the happiness that are around us and that are available to all of us. Some years ago, I was serving a congregation in Northeast Ohio. I was approached by one of our members about starting a dance group at the church. I like the sound of that. At first, this person, her name was Linda. At first, I thought she must be talking about like a liturgical, a worship dance group that would dance on Sunday mornings. That's not a bad idea. That might work. That's good. Or maybe a performance group of some kind. But it turned out she had something very different in mind. She was simply looking for an informal, unstructured space that anyone would be invited to, where people could just dance and move. That was it. There wouldn't be any practices or performances. There wouldn't even be any specific dances or routines to learn. The group would simply dance for the sake of, dancing. Now, as we talked more about why a dancing group was important, Linda told me that dancing was essential for her well-being because more than anything else, dancing made her happy. So I thought, this sounds like a sermon. Tell me more, Linda, tell me more. So when I asked her to describe what it is about dancing that led her to be happy, she simply said that when she danced, her whole body, her whole being became part of the music and the dance. In those moments, brief as they were, all of her worries and troubles would just sort of disappear or at least fade into the background. And she would become fully present, fully in the moment, and fully alive. And as she danced, she would experience a kind of bliss and joy and contentment that I think are the essence of what it means to be happy. And it's that connection, that fading of the boundaries and the distinctions between you and me, us and them, humanity, and the cosmos. It is that deep connection and oneness that is the essence of what it means to be happy. And those connections, friends, are available in every moment. Happiness doesn't require that we do extraordinary things, that we climb the tallest mountains, or that we be accomplished dancers. I'm happiest when I'm doing the simplest of things, like spending time with my family, which I've been doing in a very loving and kind way the last few days. Making those silly grandpa faces at my granddaughter and listening to her laugh. And yes, if you would like to see those faces, I'll be putting them up for auction next fall. And the reason I'm happy in those moments isn't because I'm doing anything out of the ordinary. It isn't because I'm pursuing any kind of goal or following a plan. I'm just there, relaxed and connected by love. And I think that was the essence of my problem that night at the talent show when I couldn't figure out how to be happy. There I was. What a perfect setting, surrounded by the very people who brought so much happiness to my life. My wonderful wife, my church friends, my whole congregation. And yet I was lost and clueless. I got so caught up in trying to get happiness right that I lost sight of the fact that happiness isn't a box to check or an item to cross off of a list. If I had just managed to let go of my silly expectations and preconceived notions, and instead managed to just relax and be present and to experience the laughter and joy of the moment, I know I would have been a fabulous happy with a capital H. And that's the message, the lesson, whatever you want to call it, that I want to leave you with this morning about happiness. Don't chase it. Don't try to grab onto happiness or turn it into an object or an assignment like I did that night at the talent show. Relax. Take a breath. Be present. Be with those you love. Be with your friends. Be with this congregation. Take a walk. Sit on your back patio. Experience the beauty of nature, a sunset, or the night sky. Be like my dancing congregant Linda and let your body and your being be part of beautiful music. Follow your heart and the spirit. Let them guide you to those people, to those places, to those moments of deep connection, of belonging, of peace, and of harmony when you feel truly at home in the universe. That is happiness. May you be connected. May you be well. And yes, indeed, may you be happy. Blessed be. Thank you so much for listening.